Norse myth is a much richer universe than we tend to believe, and we shouldn't limit ourselves to the popular characters. So let us have a look at a couple of fascinating deities you may not have heard of and how they fit into the mythical universe. Let's start with Hodr. Hodr is Baldur's killer, the blind son of Odin. Hodr's role in Baldur's death is found in stanza 32 in the Codex Regius version of Völuspá. In Baldur's Draumar, stanza 11, Odin asks the seeress who will kill Baldur, and she replies, Hodr is the one who will bring the praise tree that will be Baldur down. The stanzas say nothing about Hodr being blind or of Loki playing any role in Baldur's death. That, however, is the way Snorri Sturluson has it in the Prose Edda section, known as the Gylfaginning, the better-known version of the story. In response to his bad dreams, Baldur has been made invincible, and all the gods start flinging weapons at him. Loki learns that mistletoe did not take the oath not to harm Baldur, and he makes a spear from it. Upon his instigation, Hodr takes the mistletoe and shoots it at Baldur. The shot flies through Baldur, and he falls dead to the ground. In the Gesta Danorum of Saxo Grammaticus, we have the figure Hötherus, who is a human king who, like the demigod Balderus, has fallen in love with Nanna, that is Baldur's wife in the old Icelandic version. Hötherus confronts Balderus and the gods in a sea battle and gains victory when Hötherus slices the handle of Thor's hammer with his magic sword. Hötherus then marries Nanna. In another battle, Balderus defeats him. Hötherus is now chosen king of the Danes, but in his absence, the Danes vote again, and this time they choose Balderus. In a following battle, Hötherus flees, and in the final battle, he deals Balderus a fatal wound. Accidental or not, Baldur's death must be avenged, and both the Völuspá and Baldur's Draumar also agree that vengeance was inflicted on Hodr. A son of Odin, Voli, is born and performs the vengeance when he is just 1 night old. In Skålskaparmál, Snorri calls Voli the avenging god of Baldur, the enemy of Hodr and his killer. However, in Gylfaginning he presents Hodr as blind and rather a victim of Loki's trickery. Hodr, like the avenger Voli, is one of the Aesir gods who will survive Ragnarök and re-inhabit the purged cosmos, thus pointing out his innocence, or at least in part. Magni. Magni is a mighty son of Thor. The 10th century skaldic poem Thorsdropa uses father of Magni as a kenning, a metaphor to refer to Thor, as does the Eddic poem Horbardsjod in stanzas 9 and 53. Magni is mentioned on one other occasion in poetry, in Vafthrudismál. Here Odin has just asked the giant Vafthrunir who would control the possessions of the gods. Vidar and Voli will inhabit the holy places of the gods when Surt's fire dies down. But also Magni and his brother Modi are as second-generation gods and, like Hodr and Baldur, the ones who will survive Ragnarök and participate in the new world order. They are the ones who will possess Mjolnir, Thor's hammer. Vidar and Voli are gods of vengeance, and Magni too undertakes an act of vengeance, or at least aimed at his father's opponent, in the aftermath of a battle. At the end of Thor's duel with Hrungnir, a giant, which we have from Skålskaparmál again in Snorri's Edda, Thor lies pinned under the lower leg of the dead giant. All the Aesir came up when they heard that Thor had fallen, but they couldn't move the leg at all. But when Magni arrived, the son of Thor and Jornsaxa, a giantess, he was 3 nights old, and he just threw the leg of Thor and said, "Father, what a pity that I came so late. I think I could have smacked the giant down into hell with my fist." The third character I've chosen for this list is Forseti. That is Baldur and Nanna's son. In poetry, Forseti is found only in the poem Grimnismál in stanza 15 in Odin's vision listing the abodes of the gods. Glitnir is mentioned as the 10th, studded with gold and thatched with silver as well, where Forseti dwells most of the day and settles all lawsuits. Snorri includes Forseti in the catalogue of the Aesir in Gylfaginning as well. He is the son of Baldur and Nanna, and all who come to him in legal difficulties go away reconciled. That would be the best place of judgment of gods and men. Except for his presence at Aegir's banquet in the beginning of Skålskaparmál and in the list of Baldur Kennings as Forseti's father, Forseti is otherwise unknown in mythology. Since the 19th century, some scholars associated him with Forseti, a god after whom a Frisian island is supposed to be named. That's actually not that far-fetched because the older Germanic name would in fact have been closer to this form. Besides, nowadays, Forseti is the Icelandic word for president, so pretty fascinating. Then we have Ullr, a god of skiing and hunting perhaps. The poem Grimnismál in stanza 5 assigns Ullr a home at Iðalir, the Yew Dales, but he is only a shadowy figure in the literary mythology. Snorri Sturluson includes him in the catalogue of the Æsir in Gylfaginning toward the end of the list, where he simply states that there is one called Ullr, the son of Siv and stepson of Thor. He is such a good archer and so good on skis that no one can compete with him. He is also fair and has the ability of a warrior. It is good to call on him in a duel. In the Skålskaparmál section of his Edda, Snorri says that Ullr may be called Siv's son and Thor's stepson, as well as god of skis, bows, hunting, shields, and these metaphors are attested in skaldic poetry as well. A shield might be called, for example, Ullr's ship, which suggests that perhaps he used it for transportation as some kind of snowboarder. In Book 3 of his Gesta Danorum, Saxo Grammaticus has a character called Olerus that would be Ull in Latin form. The mythological tradition recorded here has Olerus replace Odin when he was exiled because of the disgust over his rape of Rinda to get an avenger for Balderus. When Odin returns, Olerus is exiled and finally killed. Saxo says that he was such a cunning magician that he could travel over the sea on a bone. Two mysterious passages in Eddic poetry refer to Ull, one to his grace in Grimnismál and the other one to an oath sworn on his ring in Atlakvida. These details might suggest that Ull was some kind of sovereign authority figure. The etymology of his name would indicate something like glory, but that is a bit uncertain. Ull turns up frequently in place names in Norway and Sweden, so he must once have been an imported god, but like many other figures, lost in the later written sources. Kvasir. Kvasir is the god whose blood is used to make the meat of poetry. In the 10th century, the skald Einar Skólaglam in his poem Velekla referred to poetry as Kvasir's blood. This relates to the story of the origin of the mead of poetry as told by Snorri in Skålskaparmál. The peace between the Æsir and Vanir groups was sealed when both spat into a kettle, fashioning a man out of the spittle. He was Kvasir and he was so wise that no one could ask him a question he could not answer. However, his wisdom did not save him from the dwarves Fjalar and Gjallar, who murdered him and mixed his blood with honey and made the mead of poetry from it. They told the Æsir that he had choked on his own wisdom. So in case you feel particularly knowledgeable, you might want to be on your lookout. In the Gylfaginning, Snorri describes Loki's attempts to evade the vengeance of the Æsir after the killing of Balder. He changed himself into a salmon and jumped into the river, but when the Æsir arrived at his distant hideout, the first of the Æsir to approach was Kvasir, who recognized in the ashes of a fire the form of a net the gods then built to help capture Loki. So Kvasir had to die in the past, but seems to be very much alive in the mythical present. No need to take these chronological discrepancies too seriously. This Kvasir is consistent with the one Snorri presents in the Ynglinga saga, in which the Æsir-Vanir war is presented historically. There, Kvasir, the wisest of the Vanir, is sent to the Æsir as a pledge of peace at the end of the hostilities. Moving on with Vidar. Sometimes he is called the Silent God. Snorri includes him in his catalogue of the Æsir in Gylfaginning after Höd and before Voli. Here Snorri says that Vidar is the silent god and he has a thick shoe, and that he is second in might only to Thor. In Skålskaparmál, Snorri places Vidar among the other Æsir at the banquet of Ægir and mentions him as the silent god, the owner of the iron shoe, the enemy and killer of the Fenris wolf and the son of Odin. In his account of Thor's journey to Geirröd in Skålskaparmál, Snorri says that the giantess Grid, the one who equips Thor with various pieces of equipment, is the mother of Vidar the Silent. We seem to have some representations of Vidar on the stone crosses at Gosford in Northumbria and Kirk Andreas in Isle of Man, but they do not show any special footwear. I mean by this the one made of scraps from people's shoes, footwear that he uses to tear the wolf's jaw. The issue is further complicated by the existence of an alternative version of Vidar's killing of Fenrir, this time with a sword, in Voluspor in stanza 56, which states that for the son of Hverung, that would be Loki, he makes stand with his hand a sword in the heart. Vidar's major act in the mythology is one of vengeance as well. In this, he is like Voli, the avenger of Balder. Vidar and Voli are linked not only by acts of vengeance and by alliteration, but also by virtue of surviving a Ragnarök. By killing the wolf, Vidar keeps it from destroying the cosmos, which can then be restored in the aftermath of the apocalypse. Then we have Hoenir. Hoenir is a very enigmatic god, but he is involved in major moments of mythology. Stanza 17, 18 of Voluspor tell of the creation of the first humans, Asker and Embla, who were merely faithless logs. Odin, Hoenir and Lodur endow them with various qualities. Hoenir's gift is Odr, which means poetry or mind, and it is in fact identical with the first syllable of Odin's name, actually an adjective mad here, and with the god Odd. However, Snorri says that the creators were the sons of Bur, that would be Odin, Vili and Ve. There is also a close connection with Loki here. Lodur seems to be Loki. Haustlöng, one of the older skaldic poems, refers to Loki twice as Hoenir's friend. The three companions, Odin, Hoenir and Loki, also travel together in the episode in the heroic legend regarding the compensation for the killing of Otter, whose skin they had to fill with gold. I talk about this in detail in my video about the magic ring of Andvari, so feel free to check that out. So the presence of Hoenir as one of the triad of traveling gods seems fairly constant. According to Snorri's story of the settlement following the Æsir-Vanir war in the Ynglinga saga in chapter 4, Hoenir was sent by the Æsir to the Vanir along with Mimir as part of the exchange of hostages. Hoenir appeared to have the qualities of a good chieftain, but it turned out that he relied exclusively on the counsel of Mimir, and when Mimir was not present, he just responded to the queries by saying, "Let the others decide." The Vanir therefore realized that they had been cheated, and they beheaded Mimir and sent the head to Odin, who actually preserved it. Hoenir was, indirectly at least, a contributor to Odin's techniques for acquiring wisdom in this sense. Voluspor in stanza 63 adds Hoenir to the list of the Ragnarök survivors. The line in question says that after unsown fields grow and Balder and Höd return, Hoenir was able to choose Hlautvid, which might signify wooden lots. If so, this line would imply that he survived Ragnarök but also carried out some sort of divination, a magic function perhaps. In Skålskaparmál, Snorri mentions possible kennings for Hoenir. These include Mud King and Long Leg, so we can speculate on an obscure connection to birds like cranes. Mimir, or Mim. Another mysterious god associated with wisdom and the well at the center of the cosmos. In Eddic poetry, Mimir turns up in the expressions Mim's head and Mimir's well. The myth behind the first expression is the aforementioned one told in the early chapters of Snorri Sturluson's Ynglinga saga, meant to be understood as history. At the end of the Æsir-Vanir war, the Æsir sent Mimir along with Hoenir to the Vanir as part of the exchange of hostages. Upon realizing how useless Hoenir was, they behead Mimir, but Odin embalms it and listens to its many truths. Sigurdrivumál, a poem where the Valkyria Sigurdriva teaches the hero Sigurdur about the runes, in stanza 14, it is stated that Mim's head spoke wisely the first word and told the true staves. This is followed by a list of runes that may be carved, a list that also precedes the stanza. With Odin definitely connected to the origin of the runes, this can generally point out to the wisdom that may be derived from Mim's head. The head would have the function of a medium here, facilitating the transfer of knowledge. Furthermore, the name is also related to memory, again something Odin is very keen on preserving. When talking about the world tree, Yggdrasil, Snorri Sturluson says in the Gylfaginning section of his Edda that under that root, which turns toward the frost giants, is Mimisbrunn, in which wisdom and human knowledge are hidden, and that one is called Mimir, who owns the well. He is full of wisdom because he drinks from the well with the horn Gjallarhorn. The seeress of Voluspor mentions this well in connection to Odin's wisdom when she states, "I know, Odin, where you hid your eye in the famous well of Mimir." So either the poet apparently imagined that the eye could be used as some kind of vessel, or the pledge of Odin he speaks of means the entire well. The location of Mimir's well beneath the route that runs toward the frost giants suggests a primeval link to the giants, even though we know that Mimir was a member of the Asir gods in the mythical past. Here again we may be dealing with a conflation of concepts, but at any rate the figure plays a vital part in the idea of Odin. So 2 more characters to point out. We have Bragi as well, a god of poetry who may also have been conflated with a historical poet, the first skald we know of, Bragi Boddason. According to Snorri, he knows most about poetry, and because of him, Bragr is actually called poetry. Many of the mythic narratives of Skålskaparmál are told in the context of a dialogue between Ægir and Bragi. I won't go into further detail here, as I already made a video on Bragi, detailed, albeit older. Please feel free to check that out. Or you can continue with the more recent one about Hermod, the one who descended into hell to inquire about his brother Baldur, a very compelling story with some interesting details about the afterlife. Enjoy these, and if you have more examples not mentioned in this video, feel free to contribute in the comments. This was Irina, thanks for watching or listening, and till next time.